All right, so I'm going to share my screen now. So this is about the Quick Mass Pro panel. I'm going to show you the program. So as you can see, I'm going to start with a short intro. Then I'm going to be explaining the main features and the workflow of the panel, the suggested workflow. I'm going to be doing a few demonstrations, and then there's going to be a break after 1 hour. So what will be in this session? Okay, of course, a quick overview of the most important features. So I'm just going to go through the panel just quickly, and then I'm going to do a few demonstrations. I'm also going to use the Black and White Artisan Pro panel to demonstrate how you can use the masks that have been generated with the panel in a practical way. What I'm not going to be demonstrating today is to do very detailed demos of all the functionalities of presets, because there are way too many of those, and there's not enough time for that. And besides that, there is a knowledge hub that you can find here, okay, with all the information, with the PDF manuals, with the quick start for beginners, masking tips, FAQs, and whatnot. Because there's a lot of information already available, plus some YouTube videos that you can also find here on the Knowledge Hub. And you can access the Knowledge Hub by just going to the panel and just click on this book button that you see here. And that, sorry, that's for the Artisan Pro panel, but it also applies to the Artisan Pro panel. But here for the Quick Mass Pro panel, just click on the book button and you will be redirected to the Knowledge Hub. So that is something that that is important. So please try to occasionally check that Knowledge Hub, because I will be adding new material to that Knowledge Hub every time. Okay, so also I'm not going to go into the basic and more advanced principles of masking in general, because that's already explained in one of my 5.5 hours video tutorials. So there I'm going to talk about very important principles, and one of them is the principle that you always have to start masking in the field. That is so important, and too many people are not taking that into account when they are starting to shoot. They only look at the image, which is fine, okay. But if you also want to do the masking, if you also want to control a lot of elements and objects in your photograph, you have to start masking in the field, because it doesn't start behind your computer, it doesn't start behind Photoshop, it starts in the field. Because if you do it right in the field, if you pay attention to having enough contrast around your most important object, if you pay attention to having uniform contrast in and around your object, then it will save you a lot of frustration when you are sitting behind your computer trying to create a mask. Okay, so that's one of the most important principles that I'm discussing in that video, and of course much more. So let's get started. So this is what I'm going to be doing. First of all, I'm going to explain the differences between the old Quick Mass Pro and the new version. So as you may know, if you already have the old version of the panel, that was also available through my web store. Now with the new UXP version, and the same applies to my Artisan Pro panel, can only be purchased through the Adobe store, because of the fact that Adobe imposed that on us that we cannot sell this separately anymore. If you want to be part of their UXP community, then I have to do that through their store. And on top of that, they also receive a fee for that, by the way. Okay, so if there are any questions about purchases that you've made, about refunds or whatever, you have to go to the Adobe store, because I cannot help you with that. I can only help you with the more technical problems, if there are any technical problems. Okay, so that is one important thing. There's also the different layout. I don't have the old version of the panel here on this computer, but I think it's a more simplistic kind of layout. It's more modern, and some parts are still there, and there are also some new parts in there. That's something I'm going to explain during this session. Okay. And a very important other thing is that I'm also using Adobe's AI technology behind the scenes here. So basically, the old panel, what happened there is that I created hard masks. So not just luminosity or soft mask, but hard mask, based on the luminosity mask information that I had. And from there, I, let's say, derived specific kind of characteristics. I use some assumptions to predict a specific shape. Okay, it sounds very complicated, and it was complicated because it didn't always work, you know. But I use luminosity mask, so light information, to predict a specific kind of shape. And that's why those hard masks from the older panel weren't always accurate. Okay, so because it was just purely based on light information. In here, in this new panel, I'm also using AI technology from Adobe that can detect objects and shapes. And I'm using that to combine that with the older technology to come up with a better hard mask. Okay, so it's a combination of an older and a newer technology that makes this a completely different panel. That's a very important aspect of this new panel. On top of that, okay, I also received a lot of questions from people asking, okay, what is the difference between your panel, Quick Mask Pro, and let's say any other luminosity mask panel? Well, the question actually is completely wrong because this is not a luminosity mask panel. What I'm using, I'm also using luminosity masks, but they are not the main feature. The luminosity masks are just a bonus feature, and they are being used in the background to create the hard mask. Because there's a difference between a luminosity mask or soft mask and hard mask that I'm creating with this Quick Mask Pro panel. Because hard mask isolates shapes and objects, luminosity mask can only isolate light. Okay, that's the only thing it can do. And light is not equal to a shape. Okay, sometimes you can say something about a specific shape by assessing the light. And that's what I've done with the older panel, but not always. Okay, so the creation of hard mask is something completely different from the creation of luminosity mask that basically anyone can do and that you can find easily on the internet. And another difference with the older panel is that this panel is less dependent on the correct zone, okay, that you have selected to create your base mask from. And that comes also with a downside, because if you don't know the exact zone from which you created your base mask, then it's also harder to assess which zone you need to create to do the advanced refinements. But I think that's a minor downside. Furthermore, we have the new partial blending and the wide tight range feature that we also have in this new panel that you didn't have in the old panel. All right, so I'm going to be doing all that. So let's get started with the first demo. That's with a bird. So normally the default is that your objects are always dark on light, okay? And the exception is light on dark, like in this case. Usually, you know, when you have something like with the sky, then it doesn't matter how bright the object itself is. In 90% of the case, roughly speaking, the object is still darker than the sky, right? I mean, that is so dark on light. So if there's no sky in your photo, then usually, I'm not saying always, but usually the object is lighter than the ground, than its background, okay? So basically it's an exception. So for that, you cannot use this section that it has no sky behind the subject, and you cannot use this section. You have to use this one, the exception. And that only has two different kind of possibilities, low key and low key studio. Low key studio is meant to be used when you have a real dark, almost black background, like in a studio setting. So if you're shooting still life in the studio with a dark background, then you have to use low key studio. But normally, like in this, you have to use the low key, and there's no other option possible. Okay. So let me start by creating a selection by Photoshop first. Okay, so I'm going to do that. Start with subject selection. By the way, there's a difference between subject and object selection. So in case there's just one clear object on your screen, in your photo, then you can use subject selection. If there are multiple objects in your photograph, then you cannot use subject selection. So it will probably select all those objects if they are in sharp focus, or the wrong one. Okay, so let me show you that before I continue with this. Where's that photo? Oh, there it is. So if I just want to have this building, for example, and I would click on select subject here, then since both buildings are in sharp focus, it will select both buildings, not just this one. So for that, you cannot use subject selection, which is a pity, because the thing is, subject selection is the most accurate selection that Photoshop offers, okay? Object detection tool is always less accurate, okay? That's always the case, even though when you're doing portraits, if you want to create a selection of your portrait, then subject selection is still the best. It's, it's unbeatable what Photoshop can do with portraits. But this comes really close for portraits. But for other objects, like buildings or trees, it doesn't do a super good job, okay? But still, it's a decent kind of selection. So for that, if you have multiple objects, you have to choose this object detection and then say, okay, I just want to have this building, and then we'll automatically select that, like so. But this is always inferior to the subject selection that Photoshop offers. And this subject versus object detection tool is something that is important for my panel as well, because you have to choose between auto subject detect, in which case what it does panel behind the scenes is to create a subject using Adobe's AI technology, okay, and then it improves on it, okay. So that's what's happening behind the scenes. And if you want to have a specific object like in this, you have to go with something like this, like object detection. Then you have to indicate, okay, this is what I want. So it creates a selection of that. Let's say like so. Okay, this is the wrong one. So I have to go here instead of subtract. I have to go here, do that. Then we'll select that building. And this is, I need to give as input for the panel. So it's either auto subject, which does everything behind the scenes, or manual object detect, in which I have to indicate what object I want to have selected. In this case, I would always recommend doing that with the object selection tool, okay? Because the more accurate the initial selection that you've created here, the better your final result with the panel. Okay, going back here to the bird. So this is by using subject selection by Photoshop. I'm going to save that. Yes, subject selection. So if you look at it, it's not too bad, but it's not very accurate either. Okay, because if you look at the wings, for example, there you see that it's missing several parts, like in here, especially this section. Look at that. You can see that it's missing quite a few essential details. Its tail, okay, this part. You see that it's there with the very intricate feathers, but it's not here in the subject selection tool by Photoshop. And the same applies to things like this. That is there, but not as accurate as it should be. So this is what Photoshop can do. Okay, and I'm claiming with this panel, in most cases, you can improve on the mask that Photoshop has created for you using AI technology. Okay, that's my claim. I'm not saying it will work all the time, because of course, I'm not perfect. The panel's not perfect. Life is just not perfect at all. Okay, so you have to deal with that. So let me do that. And I can only use this. I have to use low key. I'm using wide range because the thing is, I want to include the feathers. Okay, so basically this is the radius. Tight range means, okay, there are no things sticking out, simply put, okay, but there are things sticking out here. So I'm going to use the wide range. So I'm going to click on low key, and then I'm going to have the mask of the bird. All right. Okay, there we have it. So 3 base masks. Of course, you don't have to use all 3 of them. You just choose the best one. Okay, so I'm just going to evaluate which one I like. Looking at this one, that one, that one, 1 or 3. I think number 3 is the best one. Okay, I think you can also see that. It has more detail also here, but also here. So I'm going to get rid of those 2 other channels. Just going to get rid of this. And I'm going to be using this as a starting point because it is obvious that I also need to have the legs, okay? Also the beak. And I just want to add more details to its feathers here and there, and maybe do some more stuff with it. Okay, but you can already see if you look at the original version by Photoshop that if you look here, this specific section, okay, let me indicate it with this. You see, it isn't there in Photoshop, but it is there with the panel mask. Okay, so that's what I'm already improving on, you know, that part of the mask. Also, the feathers are there, while they're not there in the Photoshop version. And also the feathering here, if you look at that, is also more accurate in the panel version if you compare that to the Photoshop version, right? So I'm trying to add more to this. Okay, I'm gonna deselect that. So first of all, before I start refining the mask, what I'm gonna do is to add the beak and its legs to the photo. So for that, and the reason, by the way, that it hasn't been selected in this case here, the beak, is because there's no contrast. It's impossible to see where, well, not easy to see where the beak is, okay? You can't hardly see it. So that's why I'm saying shooting started field, it starts with having enough contrast around your main object, in this case, the bird, right? So here, it couldn't select anything because there's not enough information available, not enough contrast available there. And this, the Photoshop version, you see that it isn't able to fix that. Okay, so I'm going to add that first. I'm also going to add legs. And for that, for this part and that part, I can easily use object detection. Okay, so I'm going to use that. Because if I try to do it with subject selection, it will select the entire bird. So I'm just going to go in here and then roughly select it. In this case, I'm just going to use the lasso tool from the object detection feature, the lasso tool, because then I can just do something like this. All right, like that. Okay, it doesn't do anything. I'll admit I did something wrong in here. Yeah, there it is. So that's what I'm going to use. And I see that here there's some, okay, let me have a look. I don't want that part. I'm going to subtract that part. Okay, it stays there. You know what? I'm just going to leave it. And I want to do the same for its beak. Grab the object detection tool again over there. Let's do the rectangle this time. Okay, so that part. So this is my mask. I'm just going to add that part to that. I'm not going to try to refine it because I think it's going to be impossible to refine with the advanced refine feature. So I'm just going to do this, go to quick refine, set it to 4, normal adjustments, then make it lighter. And the same for the legs. There it is. Okay, so it also selected that part. So instead of using this feature, I'm just going to grab my brush, set it to normal 100%, and just fill it in. Because I just, I just do this, and that's even better. Okay, oops, I did a little bit too much there. Go back again. Okay, needs to be a little bit more careful there. This is okay. No, just a bit. Okay, suppose that it's like this. Let me see how does it look. Right here, okay. Okay, this should do for now. All right. So we've added the legs and the beak, and I'm going to try to refine it. And once again, compare it with this. Okay. And now this version by the panel. So if you want to refine this, and like I said, I created this mask using the light on dark exception, right? Because this is light on dark, so I have to use this exception over here. So if you want to refine it, you have to invert it first, okay? You only have to do that when you've created your base mask off of this feature, okay? Then you have to invert it. If you create your base mask from this section or that section, you don't need to invert it, okay? Only from this part, if you use that specific section. Okay, so that's why I inverted it. And I'm going to go to Refine Mask and Advanced Refine. And the big difference between Advanced Refine and Quick Refine is that Quick Refine is a very well, rough selection, rough adjustment. You just add light through a normal way or through the overlay mode way. Okay, so it's more selective. But this, you know, the Advanced Refine isn't just darkening or lightening areas. It's also bringing back details if necessary. Okay, that's a big difference. So Advanced Refine is very useful if you want to bring back some more details into your mask. Okay, so that's what I'm trying to do. I just want to have a little bit more detail in my bird over here, but also over there, but also over here. The thing is with the Advanced Refine is that you always have to use the same zone from which you created your base mask from, or the adjacent zone. So that we don't know, because here with this light and dark, there are just two options, okay, low key and low key studio, but there are no other options. So you really don't know if the exact zone is low mid, mid high, or high key. But of course, that cannot be high key in this case. So I have to make a guess. So what I'm doing is to say, okay, I'm going to look at the photo. It's light and dark. So I would say that it's not low key, because I would only use low key if the difference between the object and the background is very minimal. So this would be dark and that would be dark as well. But in this case, I would go for either low mid or mid high. I would always go for one of those two middle zones. If I try to use high key, that wouldn't make any sense, because this is not a high key photograph. High key is this is very bright, and the background is also very bright. So most of the times you would need to use one of the mid zones, basically low mid or mid high. So in this case, I'm going to use low mid. So create the low mid. Okay, just ignore this message and ignore those temporary channels because they're used in the background. Just go to your channel that you want to adjust, and that's this one. Okay, and stand on that. Okay, so what I want to refine are, for example, the okay, let's start here. So here, I just want to bring back some more black in there. So what I do is to roughly indicate with my marquee tool what I want to have, and then I'm going to modify the selection with the feather radius of 15, just to make sure that the transition from here to there is going to be subtle, so you don't see a strange hard edge over there. Okay, so that's what I'm doing. Just save it, just to make sure if I might need it another time. So T1, temporary one. So don't forget to get rid of those channels when you're done with the adjustments. So in this case, I want to make this darker, black. So I start off with 2 or 3. I prefer to start off with 3. Okay, so I'm going to click on that. Okay, you see that it's going to add some more of those black. I'm going to do it again. So for this, I'm going to find a new automated feature that it will always pick up the last selection. So you don't need to reload it again. But let me try it 4. Okay, that also works. It gets a little bit dark in the background. You see that? A little bit grayish, but it's easy to just fix that. One more time, and then it should be good for now. All right, so I'm going to fix this in the background. For that, you can also use the panel, but since it's just a light gray, it's easier and much better to just grab your brush, set it to white foreground color, set it to overlay, and just go over it with just one pass. Okay, because the fewer passes you need, the better it is. Okay, the more passes you need, the more destructive it will be for the edges and the pixels of this mask. So preferably just one pass like this. Okay, so there it's done. So I'm quite happy with this, even though it's not perfectly done there, but I'm going to leave it like this. I'm just going to add a few more feathers in the tail. So I'm just going to grab this again, just indicate roughly, okay, that's what I need. Okay, modify it, feather, set it to 15, which is a good setting. Save it as tab number 2. Don't forget to remove it later on. And now I'm going to add a few more details in there just by clicking black. Yeah, I'm going to do it again. Yeah, you can see that. And once more, and then I think it should be okay. Yeah, okay, now have a look at this. You see that now it's a better representation of what it should be here if you compare it with this. And this must be 4. See, it's quite a difference. Okay, and I'm not even going to compare it with what Photoshop did, because that doesn't make any sense at all. I'm going to invert it so you can make a better judgment yourself. This is the Photoshop version, and this is the panel version. Okay, it's much more accurate. I'm going to do the same for those feathers there. Okay, like this. Okay, I'm not going to save it, but I'm just going to do it once. You see that? It's back there again. I can do the same for this, but I hope you see that it's already much better than the original Photoshop mask. So here, compared with this Photoshop version, and like I said, what I'm trying to do with this panel is to use Adobe's technology to recognize objects and to improve on the mask that has been created by Photoshop. And in this case, I can say yes. Okay, so suppose that you have this and you're already happy with it. Do not forget to get rid of this. Okay, suppose that you're already happy with this. There are also some people who would like to have more, let's say, a translucent kind of mask to reflect the translucent characteristics of this grain. And it is also very useful if you are doing wedding photography and you have to shoot the dress of the bride. Okay, so it's usually translucent with the veil and stuff like that. And you cannot do that with the Photoshop technology. You have to have some specific tools for that. And fortunately, I'm offering that specific kind of technology with this panel. Okay, so I can show you how I do that. And so here, if you want to make this more translucent, then what you do is just roughly select it again. Let's say start here. All right, there. Do not forget to feather it a bit. I'm just going to save it, call it T3. Okay, now I can use the same setting because we already decided that it's going to be low mid, even though sometimes it can vary. Okay, if this would be completely different in terms of tonality of zone compared to this, then you have to go with another zone. Okay, but it's roughly the same. This area is roughly the same as this area, roughly the same as that area. Okay, so that's why I'm still using the low mid. I got rid of them. Well, I should have got rid of that. Okay, there it is. All right. Load that selection. That was T3. All right. Now click on white. You see that it's there. I can do it again. Okay, I'll just load it again. T3. Let's do it a little bit stronger. That might be too much, I think. Way too much. Okay, go back. 3 is enough. You see that? And of course, if you don't want this to be included, then you can just darken that. Okay, but this is just to show you that it is easy to make, well, to represent the translucent character of specific objects, like in this case, the bird's wings. So that's what you can do with this panel. And you can do so much more. Any questions about this part?
No questions in the chat.
Joe, I have a question, Joe. This is
Okay.
Jorge, Joe. Let's say you have finished the refinement and now you want to add contrast and finish your edit. Do you invert the mask again to make it white?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Because this is not the selection of the bird, but of the background, right? Because,
Exactly, yes.
I only did this because I wanted to make the advanced refinements, and I can only do that in this specific case because it's light on dark. I could only do that by inverting the mask first. So that's the only exception. Okay, so if I want to use it, I have to go back here again.
Excellent. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Joe.
Not a problem. Okay, then we go to the tree. Okay, so let me start by showing you this. What Photoshop can do with the subject selection, and in this case, I don't need to use the object detection tool, because the thing is, there's just one clear object, that's this tree, and that is something that Photoshop can easily recognize. So I'm going to use that subject. Okay, I've created a selection, so I'm going to save it now. And again, you know, Photoshop creates selections. What I do with the panel is creating masks. There's a subtle difference. Okay, selection is just the marching ants that you see. Once I save it as a channel, I call it a mask. Okay, but that's the way that I call it. Okay, and by the way, selections like you see here are always 8-bit selection, while masks, channel masks, can be 16 bits. Okay, that is hardwired in Photoshop, and that's also something just in case you didn't know yet. Okay, I'm going to save this by Photoshop, and you see that it is not a very accurate tree selection. I can now do the same. Okay, I can get rid of this because I don't need this, but I use it for comparison. So I go to my mask, and I'm going to use the auto subject detect here. It is dark on light. It's the default. Okay, so I don't need to use this. So it's dark on light. There's, in this case, it says no sky. Then I have to go here because this says it has sky behind the subject. Always use this option if you have a sky, or if you have a neutral gray, or let's say flat background, like a studio setting. If you have a gray background, then Photoshop also thinks it's a sky. You can also use this section there. So don't forget about that. Okay, so if you have some flower in still life in a studio with a very flat grayish kind of background, it sees that as a sky. So then always use the sky behind the subject, because it creates a more accurate kind of selection. Because what it does is to use both kind of information, subtracts it, intersects it, and whatnot. Okay, it does a lot of things behind the scenes so that the end result is going to be even more accurate. Okay, always try to use this if you can. So in this case, if you look at it, okay, I can choose between high key, mid-high, low mid. Low key, of course, you know, it's not high key because this is dark object, lighter background. It's also not low key because then you have to have a very dark background and a dark object. So it's either one of those, mid-high and low mid. And I think I'm going to go with low mid because it's more bordering against the darker side. So I'm going to go with low mid. But if this doesn't work out, you can always go try this out. Okay, and I'm also using partial blending. So what it does, you know, is that it will create a mask that is hard around all those edges that are adjacent to the sky. So that's going to be just a normal hard edge. But everything that's not a sky, it will make a subtle gradation. So it will be subtle over here. So it can you can use the mask directly when you are trying to post-process your image in black and white, for example, and you want to only do something with the tree, but not do something with the background. Of course, you can also do something with the ground, but that's the idea. It saves you time. Okay, it saves you time to go with the accurate selection of this specific edge there, because else you have to go in here. Okay, then decide, okay, where does the tree stop? Where does it end? And that's really hard to assess. So that's why I would recommend partial blending in that case. I said low mid, so I'm gonna do that. So sky behind subject, auto subject detectors on, so I don't need to create an object with the object detection tool. So just start with this. Normally this goes in seconds. Okay, so here we have it, 3 masks. I'm just going to decide which one I like to use. I think number 1 is the best, right? I mean, you can see that this has more detail. It's just better. Okay, so I'm going to get rid of number 2 and 3. Put it there. Use this one. Okay. You can already see if I compare that with the Photoshop version, that this is much better, right? This is not much better, but this one's much better, right? And you see this also, this subtle edge here. This is very soft edge, but it is not here where the tree is adjacent to the sky and intersects with the sky. That is just a hard edge, because if you would have the same effect like you see here around the edge of the tree, then you would see a halo, right? Okay, so this is what I have. So now I just want to make it more accurate because there's still too much white in there. And also I'm missing some details like this and like in here. So I want to add that. Okay, so what I'm going to do is to go to Advanced Refine. All right, so I've used low mid to create a base mask from. So the zone that you have to use is one of the adjacent zones or the target zone itself, which is, sorry, or the base zone itself, which is low mid. So I'm just starting off at low mid because usually that's the right kind of zone. So I'm going to create low mid. All right, ignore this. Just go, these are the temporary channels that you have to get rid of later on by clicking on delete low mid. So you have to stand on here. So in this case, it is a default from of dark on light. I don't need to invert the mask. Okay, I can just adjust it like it is. All right, so I'm just going to go in here. And then I say, the details here I want to add. So I'm just going to roughly select it with this. Let's say I want to have those details. Also, I'm going to modify feathering 50. Then save selection, call it T1. All right. Stand on there and just click white. I set it to 3. Okay, there it is. You see just one pass, it's already enough to add those details back. So before, after, okay. I want to have some more details here as well. Let's say this section here. Do not add the grass there. All right, like this. Stand on there and then say, give me some of those details for that part, and there it is. I can do it again for other sections, but I'll leave it at this. Okay, so I'm happy with that. Added those details, but still, you know, I need to refine this part here because this is a little bit too dense here. It's too wide. So basically, I use the same kind of zone for advanced refinement, and I'm just going to select the entire tree. Yes. Modify feathering. Okay, because I don't want to have a hard edge in here. All right, save it. Call it, what was it? T2. Right, there we have it. Okay, now the only thing I need to do is just click on black instead of white, because then I make it more, less dense and more accurate over here, but also over here and here. Okay, that's one pass. I'm going to do it again because it can be much more accurate. Okay. Once again. Okay, I'm going to go there. All right. So this is what we have now. And I think this is a fairly good representation of what we already have here. So this is the tree. Okay, this is a blurred branch that you see there. well, it's sort of represented there. Okay, I can add a little bit more white, but that is just specific detail. But the rest is looking very, very good, I think. Right, just go here. Just those kind of details there. And they're a little bit rough around the edges, because if I zoom in at 300%, you see a jagged edge, okay? But the thing is, you have to feather it. Okay, that is a very important aspect of my workflow, especially if you are dealing with very intricate details and objects like a tree, with all the branches, with all the leaves, but also hair and fur. If you intend to go into post-production and to push the contrast quite a bit, the more you have to feather that. Okay, the more subtle the edges need to be. Okay, just keep this in mind. Okay, if you are doing that, especially with those kind of objects, I'm not talking about geometric objects like buildings that have very clear straight lines. In that case, you don't need to feather it that much. Okay, but in this case, like this tree, but especially very translucent details, you have to feather it much more. So let me do that, and then I'm going to apply it into black and white workflow. So I'm just going to get rid of those. Okay, I can also get rid of this. This I don't need anymore. Okay, this is my starting point, but I'm also going to create a sky mask. Okay, so that's what I'm going to do, because I want to use it in my black and white workflow. So let me go to sky mask there. And the default is always sky mask default. All right. If you want to enhance it, if you want to reveal more, then you click on one of those. Or if you want to conceal more, you click on one of those. But let me start with default. You see it doesn't look really good. So what I can do is to just leave it as like this. And what I can do then is to use this mask to refine this. Because the thing is, not only do you want to have a better sky mask, but it needs to match this one. Okay, because else it doesn't really match up, around the edges with a different mask. So I need to use this mask, especially with very detailed, intricate details and objects like this. You need to match it up exactly with that. Okay.
Is the question okay, Joe?
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Can you just simply invert the mask that you have of the tree, and then call it, remove the base and call it the sky?
Oh yeah, I could do that. I could do this, like that.
Yes, that's what I mean.
Yeah, and that's what I'm going to do.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so that's what I'm going to do. So this, I have this. So what I'm going to do is to just say, okay, this section here, just going to use my lasso tool, just say this part here. Oh, too much, once again. Okay, roughly like this. All right, and then I'm saying that part, sorry, I'm saying this I want to do in here, right? So I'm standing here and then say enhance, sorry, that's this one. Okay, I'm going to load this one in here and intersect it within this area, right? Makes sense, right? Okay, and then I'm just going to go here, quick refine, set it to 4 lighten, just click on that, right? And maybe once again, something like that. You see, now it's there. Now I have the exact same kind of mask information in my sky mask, the same as I have here. Okay, actually what I shouldn't have done is to do it once again. I did 2 passes. I should only do 1 pass, because then it's exactly the same. Because I'm going back 1 step in history there. Okay, now the tree should be exactly the same as the original tree. You see that? Right? I think it's exactly the same. Okay, so just do 1 pass set to 4, light and normal, not selective. Okay, so now I have the same tree for my sky mask. And here, of course, I have to go back because this is what I need if I want to use the tree. And this is what I need if I want to use the sky. All right, so before I can use it, and I want to push the contrast a little bit, okay, not too much, because then I have to do even more feathering, because the more you push the contrast, the more you need to feather and shift the edges if you want to prevent artifacts showing up or other halos. But again, this is the rule of thumb that only applies to intricate objects like trees, hair, fur, that kind of stuff. Buildings is a little different kind of thing. There you can push the contrast more, but you still need to refine the edge, but it's just limited to, let's say, 1.5 pixels and a shift of the edge of plus 30 or minus 30. You don't need to shift it more or feather it more if you are going to push it more. But you have to do that with this kind of stuff, okay, with translucent or intricate details. So here, before I can use it, I'm gonna, okay, what I'm gonna do first is gonna go into Photoshop, sorry, Artist Pro, conversion to neutral. Okay, I already have a black and white version now. But first, before I do something, I'm gonna load those masks. I'm gonna refine it and feather it. If I just want to adjust a few colors or a few tonal corrections that are minor, you don't need to do that. Then those masks are good enough. But as you know, in black and white, and especially in black and white fine art photography, we like to push the contrast to the extreme because fine art photographers are extreme people. Load selection, yes, okay, that is, okay, I have to give it some more easy names because this doesn't make any sense. Call it tree, that makes more sense. And call this sky, that makes more sense. So that's better. All right, so first I'm gonna load selection of the tree. I'm gonna feather it more. Okay, so here you can go to select a mask. Sometimes select a mask is visible here, and sometimes not. I don't know why that is, but if you cannot find it here, just go in here. All right. All right, so I have the tree selected. And I always set this opacity here to 96% so I can see it better, what's happening. Okay, and I said there's also the high quality preview. And this I set to on black. That's my preference. Okay, on black, high quality preview, 96% or 97. Doesn't matter as long as it's a little bit contrasty, like in this case. So you can see the edges much better. So here, normally with buildings and other objects that are not too intricate, you have to set the feathering around anything between 0.8 and 1.5, 1.6. That's what I would recommend. But in this case, I would go a little bit beyond that. So in this case, I would go with something like 1.9 pixels, okay? Maybe even 2 pixels, something like that. And then that's not all, because you also need to shift the edge, okay? That is also important. So in this case, if you don't know if you have to shift it negatively or positively, just try it out. If you do it positively, you see that what happens then, you will get, the branch will get thicker, okay? So it will bleed more into the sky, and that's not what we want. So we have to go in the opposite direction, so to a minus number. So here, I would say something like that. Okay, let me see. So now I have, I see less white. Okay, so I think I can use that without losing the detail in the trees. Okay, that's why I'm not going any further to the point that I don't have any white anymore, because then I'm losing all the detail. So you have to find the right kind of balance, right? And I would always say that would be somewhere between 30 and 40. Okay, whether it's negative or positive, it's usually around that kind of number. Okay, click OK. I'm going to save it. Call it tree feather. All right. And then you see here that this after feathering, before. You see it's more subtle, it's more intricate. So you see that if I have pushed the slider all the way to the left to get rid of all the white, then I would have lost all those details in there. That's why I'm saying something around 40 is a good number to shift the edge. So this is what I'm going to use. I also need the sky to be feathered as well, because again, I'm going to push the contrast more. If you are not pushing the contrast that much, you can just use the default channels, default mask. Okay, then they are good enough. But I like to push it a little bit. So I'm going to load the sky as well. There. Okay, select the mask. Let me see. I'm starting off with the feathering. It's roughly the same as for the tree. So around 2 pixels. And the shifting of the edge should now be the opposite direction, right? Because for the tree, I did it the minus. So for the sky, I need to have the plus. So I'm not thinking too much. I'm just saying, okay, I'm just going to use exact same setting, so plus 40. So the exact opposite of the shifting the edge with the, for the tree. All right, so something like this. Save selection. All right. Okay. Let me show you that. Now, this is sky before, without the feathering, and this is with feathering. It gets much more intricate here. And that is needed because the thing is, again, I'm going to push the contrast. So the transition from the mask to, let's say, anything outside of the edge of the mask needs to be very subtle because we're dealing with very intricate details or translucent details. So you have to keep that in mind. Okay, so I'm going to show you what happens then. Suppose that I want to darken the sky, feathered. Okay, then I can go in here and say global adjustments, go with low key. Let's say something like that. Okay, and then if you look at that, you see that there's hardly any fringing, right? Or none at all. It's before, after. If you didn't feather the mask and shifted the edge, you would have seen fringing. Okay, and especially if you push it even more, the contrast, if it makes the sky completely black, then I would need to do even more feathering. This is something that I have, and let me push the contrast even more by making the tree lighter. So I'm just gonna load selection of the tree feathered like this. And I don't need to worry about the transition here because this is a subtle transition. It's automatically blended. So I can just use this. Let me go to depth, bottom to top, lighten, setting strength 2. And the same from top to bottom. Okay, so 2 passes, and now I'm going to show you that even now, it's still very acceptable, right? It's not that there's any fringing or strange halos. I think that's not at all, right? I mean, so we went from here to there without fringing, and that is actually very difficult to do because when you're dealing with stuff like this and you're pushing the contrast, you'll easily end up with halos and fringing that are quite a frustration. But if you do it like this, if you feather it enough, and if you, of course, if you have masks that are accurate enough, you can do this. If I want to push the contrast even more, I have to perhaps feather it even more. I can show you. Suppose that I'm going to make sky even darker. Sky, feathered. Okay, darken the sky, and that is low key. Let's say 60%. And you can already see now, you see that? I push it even more, that it looks almost strange, but it isn't. It's still no fringing, right? No halos. Correct me if I'm wrong, okay? But this before, after, this from this to there. I think it's still very good, right? I'm going to do an additional one for the lightening of the tree. And then I think you will see that some fringing will show up because now I'm really pushing it. Okay, so tree feathered. So then I would need to do an additional feathering. And what it is, I cannot tell up front because things you need to play with that. But usually, if you keep in mind the rule of thumb that I just gave you, something feathering of 1.9 or 2 point pixels, and the shifting of the edge of anything up to 40, minus or plus, then I think that's a good rule of thumb. But it might vary a little bit if you push the contrast even more and more. But let me make the tree a little bit lighter. The bottom to top lighten as well. And now I think I'm really pushing it. You see that? Now it's getting really weird. You see that? Now it's showing up because now I'm really pushing it. So this is the best I can do. If I want to push it more, then I have to feather it more. But the thing is, why would you make the tree lighter here? Because it doesn't make any sense. It's a dark tree. I would normally only darken the sky in this case, and maybe just lighten the tree here and there a little bit, but not as much as I did here with the previous iteration. I would go with something like this. If I want to push it even more, I would say sky feathered. I would darken maybe even more, like so. But then you see that I've already made the tree lighter. So the third pass is going to look weird already. Okay, well, not so weird. The weirdness is because of the lightening of the tree. But anyway, is this clear?
I have a question, Joel. This is Jorge.
Hello, Jorge.
Maybe I am confused, but the
You
original.
are. No, I'm just kidding.
The original picture had a relatively bright sky and a dark tree.
Mm-hmm.
And then you said, I'm going to add contrast. And what you did is you darkened the sky and you lightened the tree. Yeah. To me, that sounds like you are reducing contrast, not adding contrast.
Well, actually,
so where am I lost?
No, the thing is, okay, that's just semantics, okay? No, but the thing is, what I'm trying to say here is that I'm pushing it the other way, okay? So basically, something that's dark, I make light, and something that's light, I make it dark. That's what I meant with pushing the contrast in general, okay? So, of course, if you take a look at the image, then it's actually reducing the contrast indeed, because overall, it would look like a reduced contrast. But the thing is that I'm pushing the contrast within the object or within the plane.
Okay, thank you, Joel. I understand. Thank you.
All right.
So in the unrecorded version, somebody asked, because QMP now relies partly on Adobe's AI, can we assume the panel will improve as the AI functions improve?
Yes, correct. So whatever Adobe is doing, so improving the AI, and I know they are improving it, because right now the AI is mostly focused on creating perfect portrait masks. Okay, so they do that brilliantly. Okay, so there's no other software that can do it better than Adobe's subject selection for portraits. Okay, don't even try to. So that's why I didn't do any demonstration with the portraits, because that I know that I cannot improve on something that's already near perfect. But all the rest, like buildings, trees, animals, I think they still have a long way to go there. So whenever they are improving their AI technology, so for detecting objects, that is, that will also benefit the panel, of course, right? And that doesn't mean that I'm not doing anything anymore with the panel. So the thing is, there are still things that I think we can still improve in the near future, but they are not going to be very big improvements. All right. Stop video. I'm going to share my screen right now. This is an image that I took very recently at Qatar as well. So this is the headquarters of the Qatar Foundation. I find it a very interesting building. It's a very simple building, but that's what I like about it. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is to do some basic stuff with it. So I'm going to create the sky mask. And I can show you how to improve on that, especially when you're dealing with stuff like this, with the 3 branches that you see here. And I'm also going to select the building. let's start with a selection of the sky because we also have that in the panel. So go to masks, and then you have the sky mask, obviously. And what I would always do is just start off with a sky mask default, like that. So you see here that if you look at it, and if you compare that with this, it's not very accurate there. You know, there's too much black going on in there. Also here, if you look at those trees there, but also here, you see that it's too dark. If I compare that with what Photoshop creates, it's already better. So let me see that. So sky, I'm going to save that. All right. So this is made by Photoshop. I see this is better in Photoshop, but you have this kind of transition there, here, that makes it a little bit less accurate. Still, it's a very decent sky, right? I think this is a little bit better. So what I can do is the following. If I want to make this better, want to reveal more of that, is to just go here and reveal more. Okay, so I'm just going to click on that, or reveal. This is the strongest version. Okay, so it will reveal more white. So if I look at that, then you see this is looking better here as well. But then I have to correct this here. So basically, that's also very, very simple, you know, because you just, well, you can do it with the panel, but actually, you know, why would you do that if you can just do this, set it to overlay, you know, and just set it to black, and then just go over it with one pass. And here too, and then it's done, right? I mean, just try to use one pass at all times. Okay, the more passes you need, the more destructive it will be for the edges. So in this case was one pass. So I could have fixed it like that. But there's also another way to fix it, okay? Because if I compare this with the one by Photoshop, then I think my trees, my branches look better. You see that? And it's in any case much better than this one. But what if I want to improve it more? Okay, because here you see that there should be more light there. All right. Suppose that I want to improve it more. Well, there are several ways of going about that, but let me show you a way that I very rarely explain. That's by using the luminosity mask that you have here. So what I would do then is to create some luminosity mask and see how I can isolate those leaves just a little bit better. Okay, so let me try doing that. If I'm going to use darks, let me see that. I could use this one. All right, so what I'm going to do right now, what I'm doing right now is to evaluate those masks. So if I use darks 4, for example, then you see that they're pretty well isolated. If I do use darks 5, it's also quite good, but maybe I'm missing too much there. So I need to be in between 4 and 5. So I'm going to get rid of those darks. So I'm going to create the half values or the quarter values. Let me go with the quarter values. So you see, I'm for people who are new to my approach, I'm always using the luminosity mask in a very different way than with other panels. I'm always using them to evaluate the luminosity values in the mask. So here I said I need to be between 4 and 5. So let's have a look at 425 and then compare it with 475. I think I can use 425. So I'm going to duplicate that channel so I can easily get rid of the rest like so. Okay, so I have that. I can use that to make my mask a little bit better. Okay, so what I'm doing right now is to say, okay, I'm just going to stay in here. Just indicate that. I'm going to modify it a little bit with the feathering and save that as T1. And now I'm saying, okay, I need to be in here. And I'm going to load this luminosity mask in here. So there are several ways of going about that. First of all, you can do it like this. You go here, make it completely white. All right. And then load this one, the darks 425 copy, intersect it like that. And then you click on darken. You have to do it again. There you have it back, but much more intricate than it actually was, right? See that? I think this is a much better representation of what you need to have here, because remember, these are translucent objects in these. So you need to always have a little bit more feathering. You need to represent the translucent character of those leaves a little bit better in your mask. So that's why I did it like this. You see, because if you look at it here, you see that it's not just pure black and white, it's somewhere in between. Some sections are dark or black, and some sections are much lighter. But this is one way to do it. So you can do it like that, or I could also do it like this. Okay, just go back here. So suppose that I have this. What I could have done is to just leave it like this, load the 425, invert that, and then intersect it. And then you can click on light. See that? Then you have this, but then you have to darken it again by loading this again. So better yet is to not do it this way, but just to make it completely white and then load this. So you don't have to do all those double steps. Okay, so I'm going to do this again. So I have this, I make it completely light or white and select the 425, intersect that, and click on darken, then add a little bit more. And then I stop here because this is how I like it. I can do the same for this part there. But this is how you can improve the sky selection if you are dealing with those kind of intricate details like trees and leaves. Okay, now I want to select a building. I'm going to let Photoshop do the work first. So let's see if it can detect that building. Okay, so what it does is to miss this part and also this part. So the subject selection doesn't really work. So what I'm going to do is to do it again, also by Photoshop, do it with the object detection tool. So I can indicate more precisely what I want to have included in this photo. So I start by clicking on that. So it selects more now. You see that? It now includes this part, also that part. And if I want to have this part as well, then what I do is to just click on plus there, leave it on object detection. And I'm going to try to add that like so. Okay, I think this is already better. Okay, let's save it. Okay, this PS object selection. You see that it's quite rudimentary, right? It's not very accurate because if you look here, you don't have that part, right? And on top of that, you have to deal with the hard edge there. You see that? So it means that if you leave it like this, then you also have to create a selection of this part of the photo, right? If you selected this and you don't have this transition from here to there, then actually you also need to select this. But suppose that I'm lazy and don't want to do that, I just want to have selection of this building, but then with a more gradual edge, then it saves me time, right? So I can do that. So let me do that. I'm going to use the object selection because the subject selection doesn't work. I'm going to go in here, mask, manual object detect. So I'm going to use this mask that's created by Photoshop already and try to improve on it. Okay, so I don't need to do that again. It's already loaded. So now I have to start off with one of the two middle zones. In this case, since it's more leaning towards light, I'm going to I think I'm going to use the mid-high. Okay, but this says no sky behind subject, so I need to be not here, but in this section. So sky behind subject. And I want to have partial blending. Every part of the object that isn't adjacent to the sky will have this blending. So I'm going to choose this partial blending, and I'm going to use mid-high. And it's already loaded. So 3 masks again. Let's see which one we're going to use. So this is the first base mask, second, and the third. Let me zoom in a little bit, but you can already see that this part that wasn't there in the Photoshop version has now been added. Also this part there. Okay, I'm just going to turn this off, put the red. So this part, that part wasn't here. I've added that, but also the trees that you see there, they are now here as well. So now I'm just looking at the transition here. Which one works best for me? This one or that one? And you see that it doesn't affect the edge where it is adjacent to the sky, because if you have this kind of transition where the building is adjacent to the sky, then you would have this strange halo there. But the software automatically detects where the sky starts and stops. So this is also nice, but I think I'm going to go with this one, the first one. Just seems to be a little bit better. Also, the branch and the leaves there are better. So I'm going to get rid of those. If you look, we can see that there's something there that needs to be darkened, or lightened, because I'm missing the top part there. So I need to fix that. And again, I would always suggest the easy way, just grab your brush and just do it with one pass and do it like this, set to overlay. Okay, you can do it like that, maybe 2 passes. All right, if this were let's say a little bit more intricate, with more details, then I would say, okay, then don't do this, but then try to do it with the refine mask option. Okay, so the refine mask, let's say that I'm going to do that. I'm going to go to advanced refine. It was mid-high, so I'm going to start with mid-high, or if that doesn't work, I'm going to use one of the adjacent zones. But let me start here. So create mid. All right, so just ignore this. Just stand on your mask that you want to improve on. So this part, and then just do it like this. Set a feathering, roughly 15 or 10, depends on the size of your image, by the way. Like this, and then say, give me some white. It's too much, okay. Maybe a little bit less. That's better. So you can do it like that. So that is fixed. The rest is also fixed here. Okay, I can make this even better by using the same kind of trick with luminosity mask. But you can do the same for this part as with this part. Okay, I'm gonna get rid of those. Yeah.
I have a question. What would be interesting for me to see is how you would now mask the trees in front of the building, in front of the facade. So you only have the facade. Would you go with luminosity masks?
There are 2 ways. You could go with, let's say, the color range, because that should be a possibility. But you could also try the luminosity mask. But the thing is, if you try the luminosity mask,
they would interfere with the squares on the building, with the black holes. Yeah.
Yes. So in this case, I would say, I think the color range would be a better option. So what you would do then is to go in here. Okay, select color range.
Okay, all right, got it.
Yeah, and then I think you know what I'm
and
going
then
to
go over it. Yeah.
Yeah. So let me do it anyway, because then people will know what I'm talking about in case they don't know how to do that. So I'm just going to grab a sample there. Green. Okay, now let me do it again. Plus.
You can hold shift, you don't have to push plus all the time.
Okay, yeah. Let me do it like this. All right, do a little bit here. And you see now it's too much already. But let's say that this would be the case, okay, that I have this. Okay, I'm gonna save that now. That is the right. There we have it. Something like this, I think can be better, but it's not perfect. So then you can stand on here, right, on my on the mask that you've created, and then you can fill it in with dark. You could do it with a panel. This part here needs to be done. Okay, but I need to subtract the sky. Okay, there, subtract. All right, so we stay in here. Okay, and then I can do this. Stand in here. This is the one that I have. This from Photoshop. I'm going to get rid of that. It's just confusing me. Okay, there it is. And now I can load the foliage. Okay, in a sec. And I could say, okay, make it black by going to quick refine, you have something like this.
Okay.
Right, and you can click on it a few times, but you see now that also the squares are coming back again. So in that case, I would just say, okay, just stop here, grab your brush, set it to overlay, white 100%, and just go with one pass. Right, like not too much because now I'm touching this. Okay, just go here. All right, and then load it again. All right, and now instead of going with this, the normal adjustment, you use the selective adjustments, because then it will not affect what's already white. It will only affect what's already, the parts that already have a specific luminance value. So I can click on that, and you see it won't get, the rest won't get darker. Then you have something like this. I would try to make it even more accurate by taking more accurate samples, but the thing is, there's just a limitation on the color range tool, right? You cannot have it perfectly subtracted from the building.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
So I have this, I have that, I can get rid of this. And I actually think it looks already great. So if I want to split it up in, let's say, one side, another side, then all you need to do, basically, instead of doing something difficult, because you cannot do that with the panel, well, actually you can do it with the panel, but this is so much easier because there's not enough contrast to have this work down by the panel. So I would do something like this, or just quickly, okay, just not being very accurate, but since it's a very simple shape, I would do it like this. Oh, not there, hold a minute. Okay, now I could say, okay, before you do that, okay, you can make this completely white, for example, okay, but for, or completely black, doesn't matter what way, it depends on what side you need to have. But before you do that, always duplicate the channel first, okay? So then you have, can call this, give this another name. So, sorry, I'm sitting on the wrong one. I have to have this one. Yeah. All right, let's go load it again. Now I could say make this completely black. Okay, then you have just one this side of the selection. Of course, you need to include this as well, but then you can call this right hand side, for example. Okay, and you do the same with the other one. This is quite easy, right? So no more explanation needed there. And this is what I wanted to show you, that if you do it like this, you know, then it saves you creating a selection for the other parts as well. Any questions about this? Because I want to go to the next example.
I have a question. If the building is white and off-white, plus the holes in the windows, what if you did a color selection on the building and then subtracted that from the trees? Would that work?
That could work. I'm not sure if it would work, but that might be a possibility. In this case, you know, it's a quite a, actually, you know, if you want to create a very accurate selection of the trees there, well, you're gonna be, let's say, frustrated by the darker squares there. So there are not many options here, right? So you always have to go with something like color range, but that doesn't also work perfectly. So you have to find a sort of compromise in between. But yeah, it might work as well, Mike.
Also, when you're in the field, if you have a flash or something else with you that you can highlight the trees with for later contrast, that would help too, wouldn't it?
Well, maybe, yeah. I'm not sure if that would be useful to do. You could try. I've never tried that, I have to say. No. So let me try doing a selection of the building first, just by Photoshop. Okay, so let me try to do that. Let's see what it can come up with, and if I might be able to improve on it. All right, there it is. Okay, call it Photoshop subject selection. Okay, just have a look at it. This looks pretty decent. You don't see the windows there. You see that? Actually, this should be more dark gray in the mask. to represent the sky, but it isn't here. The crane looks like nothing. Okay, that's not even a crane anymore, and this is quite sloppy, right? So if you want to use this, the subject selection tool, even if I would use the partial blending, then it could, let's say, partially solve this with the transition, but I don't think this would be a good starting point. It's too messy here, right? So I prefer to use the object selection tool there. So see what Photoshop can come up with now. Okay, we just say, okay, select this part roughly to here. Well, this is much more decent, right? I like this, and I can work with that. I think it's much better than this. So I'm gonna create a mask out of this object that is already selected by Photoshop. So I'm gonna save this. PS object detection tool. So there it is. But you see, in both cases, both in the object and the subject selection, it doesn't represent the windows there, right? It's not there. Okay, I'm going to get rid of this because it's only confusing me. So I'm going to use this to create a better mask out of this selection. It's a manual object detect, and I'm going to use, so this is somewhere one of the middle zones. It's leaning more towards dark, so I'm going to use low mid instead of mid high. I only would use a high key or low key in very dark or very bright situations. So usually it's always mid high or low mid. So I'm going to use low mid here. And let me see, this is no sky, so I have to be here. And I'm going to use a partial blending as well. So I don't need to create a separate selection of this. So if you don't use the partial blending, then you have to also basically create a selection of this part and that part. So basically everything. All right, so, but I want to keep it easy for now. I'm going to use low mid, set the partial blending. All right, let's have a look. Okay, let's compare the three. So this is number 1, 2, 3. Okay, I think number 3 is the best of the set. So I'm going to use this, I think. Now let's have a look here. You see that the windows are represented now, right? I mean, you see that there's the sky visible, not the entire sky, but also some of the glass. So it needs to be something grayish or blackish. Okay, but here you see that it's being represented here as well. And again, it wasn't there. So I could use this. This is, I think, too much. Yeah, I think it's looking good. So I can already get rid of those two. You know what? I'm going to try it again, but now also with the low key and see if that's going to be better, or with the mid high. Okay, let me try that again. So selection. I'm going to use the one created by Photoshop, this one that I already saved. So instead of low mid, I'm going to try mid high and see that's going to result in something better. Okay, let me see. This is mid high. 1, 2, 3. Well, maybe you see those windows are more grayish now, right? That's what I like better compared to what I had with the low mid. I think this looks a little bit better. So which one am I going to choose then? This or that? Yeah, I think I'm going to go with this one, number 2. Yeah, I could have gone with this one too, by the way. It doesn't make a lot of a difference, but I'm just going to go with this. I'm going to get rid of this and those two. Now I have this. Okay, so the windows are represented here. I need to fix this. Okay, that's actually quite easy, so I'm not going to be bothered by that too much. But this is what I like. So basically, if you have something like that, you don't need to create a separate hard selection of that. If you prefer to do that, then feel free to do so, but then you can just go without the partial blending. But then you have to make more accurate selections of this part and that part. And sometimes you just don't want to do that. Okay, so this I like. Let's say that I want to increase the detail here in the crane. Suppose that you want to have the crane in there, then you can also do that quite easily. So I'm going to go to Advanced Refine, and I've used mid-high, right? Advanced Refine mid-high. So I'm going to start there, and if it doesn't work, I can always go to low-mid or to high key, any of the adjacent zones. But I would start here. Let me see. Yes, okay, let's go with that. Okay, stand over here now. So just ignore the temporary channels. Now just, okay, I'm gonna go here. Just making sure I can select that like that. Feathering. I don't think I need it in this case, but I'm gonna use it anyway. Just save it. Call it T1, all right. Stand here. Now, okay, set it to 2 or 3. I start using 3. Okay, that's too much. It doesn't work. Let me see. What if I use 1? Yeah, that's better. You see that? And it's, I can show you up close. You can see this cable as well, right? This very thin cable, but also that. I think the detail is quite good, isn't it? Just with one click. All right. So this way you can add all those details using Advanced Refine. And you see that I used the base mass. So I've guessed the zone of the base mass was somewhere around mid-high. So for Advanced Refine, I have to go start there or one of the adjacent zones, if that doesn't work. In this case, it worked, and it created the perfect mask for the crane there. I can do the same for this part if I want to, but you have to be very careful because here you see that this part is a little bit darker, right? So that's why I use mid-high. In this case, I think you're better off by using high key, one of the other adjacent zones, because the thing here is that it is lighter than there, right? So you always have to keep in mind the specific section of the photo that you want to improve on, and have to take notice of the zone it is in. In this case, it's more towards mid-high and mid-low. And here it's more mid-high, high key. And especially this part here, if I want to bring back the details there, then it would be more high key if you want to use the Advanced Refine. Okay, so suppose that I'm going to use this. Let's say I'm going to use this. Okay, I need to fix this also, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to use this. I'm going to get rid of that. Going to get rid of that. And you can already see that this is the crane by Photoshop, and this is my crane. You can see the difference, right? Okay, so I'm going to use this now. Just go to Artisan Pro to show you what you can do with it. If you have this partial blending like you have here. Okay, let's start with conversion, neutral. Okay, and now let's say loading that building. It's this one. Okay, suppose that I want to make it much darker. Okay, you can do that with adjustments, global adjustments, contrast, and you could do it like this, something like that. And you see now that there's a good transition, right? It's not very obvious. Before, after. Okay, there's something here, so I need to fix that a little bit. But here, you see that? So that saves you time. If you only want to work on the building, and especially in landscapes with trees, I think the partial blending is very ideal to use, because then, because in a landscape, usually you have very specific elements that you want to work on, while the foreground, background is something that you do not necessarily want to control fully. So then it really pays off to use partial blending. Well, I could do much more with this, but just to show you what you can do if you have this kind of mask option of partial blending. Any questions for now?
No questions in the chat.
Flat iron building. Basically the same as what we did earlier on with the other building. Okay, I already closed it. But I just want to show you again that in a case like this, for example, where you want to create a selection of this building, that it's really hard to detect where the building here stops and ends, right? Okay, where do you need to be here? So in that case, the partial blending option works very well, okay? So let me try to do a few things here. I'm going to start with the sky. Sky masks. Start with default. Okay, that is pretty dark there. So I'm going to try and reveal more. Is that better? It's still dark there. Okay, so what you can do now is to fix this and to fix that is to just go, well, you can go with a panel, but I would recommend going with the luminosity mask. Okay, so in this case, let me see, I would need a luminosity mask. Let me go with light. With the first example, I went with dark. I can also go with light. Let me do that. What if I use this? And this would be too dark. This would be, I think, still a little bit too dark there. What about this? Okay, this is better. I'm going to use number 2. Okay, because that's bright enough, while the leaves and branches are dark enough, but not too dark. So hopefully I can reveal some of the translucent character of the leaves. Okay, because it's not pure black. I'm going to get rid of those. Lights to copy. Okay, now in here, so grab my marquee tool again and say, okay, this is the part that I want to fix. Okay, do some feathering, even though I don't think it's needed in this case, but just to make sure, I'm going to save it as stamp 1. All right, standing in here. Now load the selection lights to copy, intersect it with that, and then all you need to do is to go in here, quick refine, and say lighten, 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 lighten. You see, I continue as long as it is needed. And now you have fixed that part. I can do a little bit more. Okay. And I can show you that it looks like this, which I think is much better than the previous one, right? This is from Photoshop, by the way. Sorry, no, this by my panel. I didn't use the Photoshop version, but this looks much better. I can do the same for this part. Let me just do it. Just standing there. Roughly here. In this case, it makes sense to feather it. No. Like that. 2. Minute. Save selection. What I'm doing now, save. There it is. 2. All right. I do the same because I think I can still use this one. All right. So load that. 2. Sorry, not that, but this, of course. Intersect. All right. And now I'm going to lighten it. Okay, let me see if that's better. And I think it is, right? I mean, this is before, this is after. And I think, yeah, you see that? It's much more accurate. And a much better representation of what's actually happening here than before. I see you still need to fix this, but that's something that I can do. And again, if you can do it with one brush stroke, I would always recommend doing that. All right, get rid of those. I have a sky selection. Okay, I'm not trying to make the sky selection even better here, even though I can do that. What I want to do now is to make a selection of this, okay, the building. And let me see if I can do more. And by the way, you can also combine the channels that you created with the, for example, with this one, and you can combine it with something like this. So if you like this much better, because this is much darker here, you can essentially just stand on here and say, okay, I want to have those 3 branches like you have here that you've created with this. You can have it in here. So you have to adjust less in the building itself. So I'm indicating the section that I want to adjust. And I'm going to load this version, intersect it, and then just say like that. You see that? I can do the same for this part too. Roughly like this. Okay, just being very inaccurate right now, but just to give you an idea, and then do the same there. So that is also what you can do. You can basically create 2 different masks. Default, one that is, for example, reveal more. So you can reveal more of the details in, let's say, the leaves or the trees. And you can combine them together the way that I did it, just by standing on the mask that you've fired the best. In this case, I think this is the best. And then try to refine it by loading this in here. Okay, before I start doing this with the building, I just want to show you something else as well. So for example, if you look here, suppose that I want to use the sky mask. You see that the sky is now bleeding into the building, right? Like this. Because this is not the sky. And here, so I'm going to get rid of this, by the way. So go away. I'm going to keep this. So I want to make this darker. Well, there are some parts that you can just do with one brush stroke. But if you want to change this, then you have to do the following. First of all, we've created a sky, right? This is a sky mask. That's why this part is white. So if you want to change this, and you want to adjust this, then you have to invert it first, just like with light on dark. But now it's in a different kind of situation. Now you want to adjust the building that has not been selected. So if you want to adjust it, you have to pretend as if it were selected, like so. Okay, so now basically I've created a mask of the building. So now I can adjust it with the advanced refine feature. So that's what I'm going to do. Okay, over here, go to refine mask and advanced refine. And in this case, it's a little bit high key, right? I mean, it's not mid-high, it's not low mid, and absolutely not low key. So I think if I want to fix this, I need to use high key. So that's what I'm going to do. Or maybe mid-high would have also worked for this part, for example. But I think for this part, we need a high key. So I'm creating that. Okay, just ignore this message. Right, now I'm going to select it. Let's see this part here. Roughly to here. Let's take this entire section. Okay, I'm going to modify feathering 15. Okay, let's go here. So what I want is for this to be whiter. Okay, starting off at 3. Okay, that was one pass. You see that? Before and after. Okay, I can do it again. Did I save that? I didn't save it. Oh, stupid. Hold on, go back. Save it first. So T2 should do it again. White. Do it again. Right. More white in it. Okay, you can see it's coming back, right? I mean, this is before, this is after. Still, this is still too black. So I think for this, you know, you need to go in there with your brush. But let me try doing it again. So the software is absolutely not perfect, but it's doing its best. All right, so something like this. And I want to show you too that this is really accurate because here, for example, you see those kind of fences that you see there. You can hardly see it, right? But it's there. And also this thing, I don't know what it is, this specific detail is almost invisible in the photo, but also this part there. You can, okay, this, you see that? I can do it like this, and maybe it's gonna go, well, it's not much, but let me do it again. It's coming there. Well, it's actually invisible, but this is how it works with a panel. You can bring back a lot of details that are even invisible to the naked eye. Okay, so then I can show you how it looked before. Okay, this before. Okay, you see this, half of the spire. This is already visible. None of the fences are visible. And then I did 3 or 4 passes, and you get all this. Okay, you see that? And this, of course, I need to fix even more. But in this case, for this part, I think it's better to just go in there with your brush because it's within the edge. So I don't have to be too super accurate. So I just set it to that. Okay, to normal. And if I make it, you could do this, right? So, and this needs to be black. That part, let me see. No, not that part. Or is it? I'm not sure if this is sky what I'm seeing, but suppose that it is the sky, then you can also do this. Okay, so the feathering. All right, then try it with black. Yeah, that works. Maybe even with 3. You see that? Then it brings back that part. Let me do it again. Yeah, that's working. You can also do it for this, I think. Yeah, you can even see this detail here. So it's quite easy to do it like that with the panel. And I hope you're convinced that if you try to do this manually, then in most cases, like in this case with those super intricate details that are hardly visible, it would be impossible, right? I mean, try to do that for this. Well, you can also do it with panel and you can see it much better. I hope you're convinced that you can do it very easily with the panel. Okay, but now let's start with the building. So in this case, let me see, I'm gonna try Photoshop first. By the way, this is of course the sky, so it needs to be inverted, of course, like this. Okay, I can show you again. And you see here now, there's some gray, but I can easily get rid of that. So I'm not gonna be worried about that, but just to show you again that you see those kind of fences. I think black and white, you can see it even better. Now I'm going to try to create a selection of the building itself. So I'm going to use subject to see what Photoshop can deliver. And you see here that this is not looking good, right? It's just cutting the building off halfway, which is not good. I need to have at least something around here. So I have to use the object detection tool, see if it can do better. Okay, so I'm going to do this and say something like that. I would like to have a little bit more. So I'm going to click on plus here, adding, then just try to add that. Because it's hard to see where the building starts here, where it ends. This is not good. Do it again. No. You know what? I'm just going to go with the rectangle marquee tool and say, I just want to add that part now, because the object detection tool isn't really helpful here. So maybe it's something better like this, but then you have a very straight hard edge. So in this case, only the partial blending would work, right? I mean, if you try to do it like this, then, you know, you can try to zoom in and see where the building actually starts, but I really don't see it. I see this is a bus, some cars over here. So it's really hard to see that. Okay, and here I just want to get rid of that too. So I'm just going to use this now, see if I can get rid of that. No, sorry, that's the wrong. I need to have the minus, subtract. Okay, maybe here as well. Yeah, something like this. So this would be.
Looks like a trolley is going by.
It looks like it, right? But I don't remember any trolleys in New York City. Or it is a bus. I'm quite positive about that. Yeah, New York City bus. It says here.
Wow.
See that? Yeah. Anyways, okay. So this is the best that I can get with the object detection tool. Okay, see if I can improve on it. So yes, object detection tool. So this is well, it's not too bad. Let me see it. Let's closer look at the details, but here you see that, for example, those statues, those things on top of it. It's a little bit rough around the edges, right? It's not super good. Well, this is much better. See that? For the sky. So this is not good. So I'm trying to improve on that. And let me see here. This is also rather rough around the edges. Yeah, and that could be improved, but in any case, I need something that blends in more subtly with the rest of the foreground, right? Because this is something that I can use it, but then I have to use the restore feature in Artisan Pro. But if you're not into that, by the way, I'm always into doing the restore because that's my favorite tool in Artisan Pro. This is, I would say, and so I'm digressing right now. Okay, so I just want to say that the restore feature is the most used feature by me in the panel. So without it, it's hard to create the photos that I always try to create. This is the most used and most, I think, also the most powerful feature in the panel. Okay, just saying. Okay, going back here. So I could solve this hard edge with the restore feature, but suppose that you are not into that, and then you have to have a partial blending. Right, so I'm going to use that. So I'm going to go here, Quick Mask Pro, Mask, Sky Mask, Manual Object Detect, because I cannot use the subject. And then I have to have starting selection first. So I'm going to use that, PS Object. And now I'm going to use, I think it should be low, mid, high. I think I'm going to go with mid-high. Not this, there's no sky. Always use this. Mid-high and or low-mid with the partial blending. Yeah, let's try that.
Joel, I wondered why the sides of that building were not straight, and I looked it up. There are convex windows that bulge out along the side of the Flatiron building that make the lines not straight. It's very interesting.
Okay, very interesting indeed. Yeah, because it's not really straight, right? It's quite funny. I mean, they're bulging out here, right? And
yep.
Also here. Yeah, you're right. Okay, so let's have a look at this. So this is number 1, number 2, number 3. Okay, not much of a difference. So I have to look more closely. Okay, let me have a look at those statues on top of the Flatiron building. Okay, this is how it looks. Okay, this is what Photoshop created. Okay, this is what I did. I need to fix this a little bit. It's a little bit grayish here. But you see this, even this this hole there, see that? This part is also visible that you have here. Okay, so I need to make the hole a little bit bigger, I think, but it's just to give you an idea. And also, okay, here, this can easily fix. This is already better. Yeah, number 2 or 3 are better. Let's go with 2. But look at this, you see that? This, it's not this kind of detail that you see here, that you don't have here, but they are there, those kind of things. Number 2 is the best one. Have a look at this. Yeah, so they're being represented in the mask. In both 2 and 3, same here. Yeah, and then we reach the point where other buildings adjacent to the Flatiron building. So there you need to have the soft transition, right? Because here's where the sky stops. So there it should be hard. You see that? That's hard. And where it's adjacent to another building, it's going to be soft. So I think number 2 is better than number 3. This has more detail. I like this much better. So this is something that you could use. And you see here that if it also included this, but I forgot to subtract that from here. You see that? But this is what Photoshop created, which is even stranger. Okay, but I have this here, and I think this is more useful. Maybe I should have been a little bit more accurate with this part here. I should have subtracted this part as well, but I didn't do that. Okay, I think number 2 would be better. And that will solve this problem here. But also here, where it's really hard to see, okay, where is the building stopping and where does the other building start and where are the traffic lights? I mean, if you just want to do a very quick job that is acceptable, then this is the way to do it, because you have this smooth transition and it will always blend in more subtly with the rest. And again, here is where the sky starts, so it's going to be hard to get. All right, so I could use that, so I can get rid of this, and I can get rid of that too. All right, so we could use this. And I need to improve on that a little bit more, so I can go in it with the white brush, but I'm not going to be bothered for now, because I just want to show you what you can do with it. And so suppose you have that. Okay, then you go again to Artisan Pro, conversion. So suppose that you want to do something with this building and you do not want to go into all the small details here. So you have to make a very accurate selection there or here. Well, it's quite difficult, very complicated to say the least, if not impossible. But this is the way that you can solve it. Now you can go into the building, that was this, and then do some things with it. Let's say I'm going to darken it first with the low key. Okay, I'm just going to not too extreme, but let's say like this. And if you go in there, you would see that the transition is quite credible, right? I mean, you don't see
Yes,
the
very
transition.
nice.
So you don't have to worry too much about that, because now it's just blending in very subtly. So you don't have to be bothered by creating all the super detailed and accurate selections here. But also here, you see that? I don't need to worry about that, because now it's just like this. It has a very smooth blending. And of course, there's nothing to be seen in the sky. That is still accurate. And over here. Yeah. Okay, and then I can do more tricks with it. For example, I can load the selection and say, use some light from right to left, or from that side. So go to depth, go to diagonals from top left. Let's do a lighting. Okay, something like that. Just to make sure that I didn't do anything there, I'm just going to do a quick restore from bottom to top. So let me see. You can see that before, after. If you see an edge, let me know, because I don't see one. it's still subtle. So this is what I did from light to low key, and then added some light there. Now it looks like this. I can do even more. So loading this building again. Let's say I'm going to go from light to dark there. So right to left. Let's do it like this. Okay, then we have this. Then I need to fix it from bottom to top. Okay, because now what I've done with this is I think I've added some artifacts or some strange transitions there. So just to make sure I'm going to look at it. Because the more you adjust it, the more you will see it. But actually, I don't really see it. Well, just a little bit here. You see that? But if I didn't tell you that, you wouldn't even notice, I think. In any case, I'm just going to restore it from bottom to top. That is quite good, I think. Okay, now I can also restore from here to there, just a little bit darker. Well, it didn't change much, but this is the idea. And I hope you see that with the partial blending, which I deliberately built in, because like I said, I'm very lazy by nature. So what I can avoid, I will avoid, and it saves me a lot of time, frustration. And then you can solve it in a much more, I think, elegant way like this, instead of going in here and trying to make all the selections there that you can even see. You know, that's much more frustrating.
Yes, when you first did this building years ago,
Yeah.
and you post-processed it, did you use the pen tool?
Yes, I used the pen tool. Yeah, yeah.
That must have taken a long time.
Yeah, I used the pen tool for this part. Okay, but I used the restore. Okay, I didn't have the panel back then yet, the Artisan Pro panel, so I did it manually with the restore. So, but that is even harder to explain how to do it manually. So that's why I created this panel, but this automatic restore feature, because this you can only solve in a good way by using a restore. If you try to do that with a accurate selection, first of all, it cannot be accurate. And if you try to fix it with the feathering, you will always see it. So restore is always better, and especially in combination with this kind of mask, with the partial blending. Any other questions?
So Manello wants to know, do you use any pre-processing in Lightroom or in ACR before you bring the image in? It might be a little bit out of topic, but he wants to know.
No, I don't do that. I very rarely use anything else than just a raw conversion from RAW to a TIFF or PSB file, because I don't use any exposure correction. I don't use any, especially sharpening. I've never used sharpening. I haven't used the sharpening tool for the last 10, 12 years. I never used that. It's pure raw, but I import into Photoshop or export to Photoshop. And the only thing that I would do is to make the crop. Okay, so if I want to have a square crop or a landscape crop or whatever, that's the only thing that I would do in Lightroom. Maybe also a perspective correction, but most of the times I don't need a perspective correction because I'm already using a tilt shift lens. So my lines are always straight, but sometimes I can be a little bit off, then I have to do a correction. So that's the only two things that I do in Lightroom, but no exposure correction or sharpening or whatever. No.
You don't even use sharpening when you're going to print?
No, never, because it's not needed. If you do it right, you don't need to have the sharpening, but then you have to do it right. Meaning you have to be aware of the micro contrast in your buildings, for example, or in your foreground. So micro contrast is actually a more accurate word description for sharpening. I call it micro contrast. And you can control that by using, for example, if you look at Artisan Pro, you can control that by using the micro zone. That's basically the same as sharpening, but you do this in a more pure way because you're looking at the luminance values only.
Sharpening is edge contrast, isn't it?
It is, yeah. Basically, in its truest form, it is exactly a local contrast that you can control on a local micro level. That's why I created the microzones. Any more questions?
No more questions in the chat.